Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're doing a little different kind of video. I'm putting on a little different hat today. We'll call it my reviewer's hat, which is something I don't really do. I am not a reviewer, but in this case I'm going to answer some questions that I've been asked a lot. And I'm going to give some feedback on some product, and there's a couple of reasons for me doing this. First of all, when Jay came down last year, Ron came over and he brought a bunch of amplifiers, and we had a jam session. Like, we listened to stuff and had fun, and when we did, I really liked this tube amp. I really liked it, which is rare because I'm really, really picky about this stuff. If there's issues with something, my flags go up and I can't get past it. In this case, I liked it, and it's tough for me to come out and say I like something. And while Ron was here, we shot a video and we talked about Jay's visit and what we were doing and all the fun we had, and we talked about Thomas's amp, which is the TS120 Special Edition tube amp. And I'll get more into that in a few minutes. But we talked about the amp and how much I liked it, and we told him that we shot a video and we talked about his amplifier. And all the footage that we shot and things that we did, we shot a lot of different stuff while Jay was here, and we lost the footage somehow or another. It got erased, it got left, it was on a different chip. Somehow we lost that footage that we did. And Thomas was really disappointed. He really would love for us to have talked about it. And not long ago, a few weeks ago, the Gallion amp was over there, which is another one of Thomas's amps. And I heard it, and I really liked it. This is the Gallion 75 TS A75. And I messaged Thomas and said, man, I really like the sound of that amp. And he asked me if I would shoot a video on these things, and specifically this amp, and talk about it, because he doesn't have that much of a buzz going around on it. And so I was asked to do this by the manufacturer. Reason number 2 I'm doing this. I get asked all the time by our customers for me to recommend some electronics for them to use with our speakers. They've got speaker this or that, or we have a pretty broad range of different types of speakers for different applications. And it's tough for me to recommend different electronics because I just don't get a lot of electronics in here within those same price points. All the electronics that we use here at GR Research for really listening to and evaluating our product are more in the cost no object range, or they are one-off custom built amplifiers, or it's a bunch of stuff that Gary Dodd built for me years ago that's, and Gary's passed away, you can't get his stuff anymore. It's everything I have in here is pretty much unobtainable, and it's really hard for me to recommend commercially available products, especially at the price point of some of our own products, because we just don't use any budget level gear. And even though our speakers compete well above their price points, they're still at a lot of entry level price points for a lot of our customers. A lot of these DIYers can get into a pair of our speakers for like $379 a pair, build the cabinets themselves, and put in a lot of their own sweat equity, and in the end have a product that's way better than what their budget would have allowed. And they ask me for electronics, and I don't know what to tell them. So I've got some suggestions, and I'm going to share that stuff with you guys today. So let's dig into these little amplifiers here. And I'm going to start with the Gallion amp. This amp is only $1,495, which is, for a lot of my customers, that's kind of at the top of what they might want to spend on amplifiers. But for the performance of this amplifier, as far as how this sounds, it performs way above its price point. Like, you could compare this to amps, $6,000 and $8,000 amps, and still not sound as good as this amplifier. I mean, there's just something about it that's just, it checks all the boxes. It does everything really well. There's really good resolution. Vocals are really nicely done. They're not overly bright. It doesn't have the typical solid state amp sound. Most solid state amps to me have a sharper, aggressive, detail level, not great in the vocal. There's always trade-offs for me. And this amp really didn't have a lot of trade-offs, especially with the music that I was listening to through it. And especially a lot of vocals. We did some Alison Krauss. We listened to some of the tracks from Heart, where they did a live acoustic album. And wow, is that thing really good. We threw some Eva Cassidy at it. That's also a live recording that's a little bit hot and forward, and it's a bright recording. So anything that tends to go in that direction usually doesn't sound great on those Eva Cassidy tracks. Listen to some Vienna Tang, which is, her stuff is so beautifully recorded, and it really did all of that really well. I mean, if you're looking for an amplifier in that price point, $1,500 and less, it's hard to go wrong with this amp. However, I did have only one issue with this amp, and it may not be an issue for anybody else, or it may be a limiting factor for you. If you're listening to music at reasonable levels, and you're listening to a lot of that music that I just named, this amp will work great for you. But we decided to test its output capability, and we threw on some AC/DC, and we brought the levels up, and it's supposed to be a 75 watt amp at 8 ohms and 100 watts into 4 ohms, so it doesn't double into 4 ohms, which tells me it may be current limiting. There may be maybe the power supply isn't up to being able to flow more current as impedance decreases. I don't know. I'm not an amplifier specialist like I am a speaker guru. But what we did notice was at higher levels, there was some compression there. Like, it was giving out. It didn't have the drive and the control of the bass to really hit high levels and hold those kind of controls. If you thought all I need really is a 40 or 50 watt amp, this amp is for you. Like, it's fine at those lower power levels. It sounds beautiful. I mean, in some ways rivaling some of the amplifiers that I have. If it just wasn't for the fact that it really didn't have as much control when you really drove the guts out of it. You can tell why I'm not a reviewer already. I am really picky about everything, and I tend to not sugarcoat anything if it has a fault. And most of the stuff that comes in here, I can't listen to. It's like, ugh, man, don't get me started on gear that people bring in and things that I've listened to, or it's like, okay, you've heard it on your gear. Now, do you want to hear it on something that actually sounds good? So yeah, I'm pretty much a tell it like it is guy. But for $1,495, any of my customers out there that are looking for an amplifier that will play in a small room, reasonable levels, and sound great, this amp is a gem. Now, the big tube amp over here, and this is a heavy amplifier. I love this amp. In fact, I liked it more now than when we listened to it back when Jay was here. There's a lot to this thing, and I'm just going to touch on the surface, and I'm going to tell you how it sounds. Ron or somebody may do a little more in-depth review, and they'll go into all the little specifics and all the little gizmos and things that it does. I'm going to tell you how it sounds. And I'm just going to touch on some of the features. It's got a control that lets you go from Class A to Class AB. And for me, I liked it in Class AB. To me, it had a little more drive and control in Class AB. I really liked the sound of it. And it has 4 and 8 ohm taps, and it has stereo subwoofer outputs, which I liked a lot. Now, I could do my big in extremes, and I could hook up the servo subs right to the sub output and work on the controls on the servo amp and blend everything in nicely. Beautiful sound, and it's got quite a few inputs, and we'll do a whole bunch of stuff that I can't even see without my reading glasses that is on the back of this. Another cool feature, it has auto biasing. You can set it to go through and rebias the tubes, and it really makes a difference. Especially if you're swapping out tubes, you could start rolling tubes in this thing and really start changing how it sounds. And then you got to go in and rebias it each time, and it has the auto bias feature. So today, Ron and I threw it in, and we were listening to it, and we cranked up that same AC/DC, the same tracks that we were using on this, and it was Boogeyman from Ball Breaker, which is surprisingly not that bad of a recording. It's a pretty decent recording considering it's AC/DC. It's a fun track, and it's something we can crank up, and we know it pretty well. So I thought, well, the bass is a little bloomy. It's missing a little control. It's a little bit sloppy. So Ron says, I have an idea. And he went over and he rebiased the tubes, and we turned it back on, fired the track back up, and just went, whoa. Immediately noticed the control came back. It was tight. It was clean. Everything about this thing really sounds good. And I think this thing is 60 watts or something. I don't remember. Look up the specs on it for yourself and go to his site, and we'll put a link down there where you can go to his site and you can check out this stuff. But this one didn't feel like it ever really ran out of power when we were playing the N Extremes. And it had really, really good control, really, really good vocals, and something that I listen for quite a bit is decay structure. And a lot of amplifiers and stuff that come through here what separates them from really good amps is it truncates a lot of the decay structure. Like when you hear the stroke of a piano and you hear that note, there is a decay that's in that recording, and I'm used to hearing that decay structure on my system. So when I drop in an amplifier that truncates that decay, I notice it immediately. This did not truncate the decay. In fact, it had a little bit of that tube lushness to those decays, and it was clean space between notes. Like there was no noise on this amplifier. Really clean and beautiful harmonic decay structure. Piano sounded really real played back through the N Extremes. Vocals sounded beautiful. I mean, this is the amp that will give you goosebumps. It's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe how good that sounds. It's kind of like going from CDs to vinyl. This had a little more of that vinyl sound to it, and I loved it. This amplifier is $4,500, and I know some of you guys are thinking, man, compared to what some of the speakers we sell, $4,500 might be a stretch for you. But let me tell you, when you're looking at amplifiers, let's say you're looking at amplifiers in the $10,000 to $20,000 range, you need to consider this amplifier in that mix. It's that good of an amplifier, and it's got a preamp built in with it as well. It's an integrated amplifier. It's got its own remote control and everything. So unlike the Gallion over here, where you still need to go out and buy a preamp, you could go spend $2,000 on a preamp, spend $1,495. You're $3,500 into a system, another $1,000, and you've got this as a one and done. And sometimes a one and done is a good solution. It minimizes your cables. You don't have another whole set of RCA cables from your preamp to your amp. So it's one less power cable. I mean, it can start saving you money because it's kind of a one and done system. So it's not that out of the question for you as my customers to consider. $4,500 is not a bad investment for something that sounds this good. And I really, really did like it. And rarely do I ever really like a product that much. Usually, whatever's wrong with it stands out to me. And contrary to what a lot of you guys think, because you see me doing speaker upgrades, and we're looking at measurements, and I'm talking to you about the measurements and how they measure, and you feel like, well, how does it sound? I want to hear sound clips and stuff, and we don't do a bunch of sound clips because by the time we record something and then play it back through a compressed YouTube file, I mean, you're hearing a copy of a copy. You're not hearing the actual sound of what we've done. And so when I do a lot of those videos, I'm talking about how it measures and how those measurements correlate to how something sounds. Whereas this is a little different case here. I'm talking about how it sounds. And contrary, like where I started on this a second ago, contrary to what you might believe, that I'm all about the measurements, I spend a ton of time listening. As much as you see me doing videos and taking measurements, I spend probably twice that amount of time just doing listening comparisons and comparing different everything, especially when it comes to speakers. I'm dropping in this speaker or that speaker, and I'm making comparisons of what its strengths are and its weaknesses and where it fits, and comparing cables and capacitors and you name it. I do a lot of listening comparisons. And so when I find something I like, it's a big deal to say I actually like something. And both of these amps I really like. So for all you guys out there that keep asking me, here's you 2 recommendations at 2 different price points of amplifiers that I can recommend for you and promise that they do sound really good. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It's a little different type of video for me. If you do like me doing these kind of videos, you can let me know. Maybe I'll consider doing some more in the future. This was an isolated case because Thomas asked me to give some feedback on these amplifiers. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hit the subscribe button, please, if you haven't, and we'll see you guys in the next video.